All right. Good evening, folks. It's being 6 p.m. and a quorum being present. I'll call to order the January 23rd, 2024 meeting of the Charter Review Committee. We start each meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. Rob, if you have screen sharing ability.
I don't.
Michelle, would you be able to give Rob the ability to share screen?
All set, Rob.
Okay. I don't have an image of the flag.
What was that, Rob?
I don't have an image of the flag.
I have one. Michelle, can you folks hear me? Getting some feedback here.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, all right. Michelle, could you also give me the ability to screen share?
Check to see if you have it, David.
I do. I'm just waiting for the flag to open up.
Can you hear me, Dave?
I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Is anyone hear
There-
turkeys gobbling?
Yeah, Martha, there's something going on with your audio.
Folks, I'm going to ask that if you are not speaking, please mute yourself. All right. Is everyone seeing the flag? Martha, can you mute yourself? Thank you. All right, we'll get started here with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
free and
with
justice.
liberty and justice for all.
All right, let me stop sharing here. And we will start the meeting with our review of the minutes from the January 16th meeting. Does anyone have any feedback regarding the minutes? Martha, I can see that you're trying to talk, but all we're hearing is what sounds like turkeys.
David, I'm not sure, and I know you painfully went through trying to get a good night for the agenda, but it seems like there's a lot of stuff with the select board moving forward before town meeting that I'm not saying it's of high importance that some people, want to be able to attend or watch or whatever. So I don't know if we could take another crack and look at the calendar and see if there's a better night instead of a Tuesday night, because it seems to have a lot of conflict with, the select board.
I mean, I can certainly take a look. I'm not prepared to have that conversation here tonight, but I will definitely take a look. Michelle, can you mute Martha? It's becoming quite distracting. Thank you. Larry, I see your hand raised.
I'd like to move that the minutes be accepted as presented.
Excellent. The motion is made by
second it.
Eisner, seconded by Mr. Lawler. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Bulletin is not present. Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote, how would you vote? You will need to unmute yourself for the roll call.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Cavaco,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
Abstain,
Sorry, Mr. Hutchinson, I skipped you.
abstain on that. I was not part of that meeting.
That's okay, Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
Yes.
Mr. Pizer,
Yes.
Ms. Votrain. Ms. Votrain appears to still be having trouble with her audio.
That is pretty funny audio.
I'm gonna skip Ms. Votrain for the time being. Mr. Zubroli,
Abstain.
and I vote yes. Ms. Votrain, how's your audio coming?
Oh, put a hand sign.
Can you give us a thumbs up if you vote yes? I'm gonna mark her as not present for the vote, in case she missed, and she's not giving a visual cue as to whether she agrees. In any case, the motion carries.
Martha, why don't you try logging out and logging back, logging all the way out and then logging back in again?
David.
Hold on one second. Michelle, thank you. She's. Larry, is your hand still up, or was that from your motion? Excellent. Go ahead, Betty.
I was not at the meeting last week, so I want to change my vote to abstain.
Okay. In that case, the motion still carries. All right. I want to jump into our discussion items for tonight. The first is the renumbering of chapters 1 and 2. We are going to, I think, at our next meeting, have before you folks that renumbering. There were a number of folks who put forward requests about some of the other chapters that we've already covered, chapter 10. And there was a minor edit to chapter 6 that was requested of me. So we will come back, sections 10 and 6 of the second chapter. So we'll come back to those at some point. But for now, we're going to move forward with chapter 3. Rob's going to send me the edited document as it stands after tonight's meeting, as well as the edited COPC document. And we'll incorporate all of the changes into the renumbering process. And hopefully we'll be able to, after our next meeting, forward those along to town council and the office for review and any feedback that they might have. All right, chapter 3. There was a member of our committee who asked to speak before we dove into the material. So I will turn the floor over to Ms. Cavaco, who has asked to speak about select board member pay.
Yes, thank you, David. As everybody knows, there is quite a bit of time and effort that goes into being a select board member, being the chair, and the $4,000 stipend is just so irresponsible for us to want to continue with, because we need to turn into a more professional, full-time type government. And I'm certain that there will be a lot of discussion, and I welcome that. But at this time, I am going to make a motion to raise that monetary value for the selectmen for $20,000 for select board members and $25,000 for the chair.
So to be clear, Betty, is your motion to include the stipend for those folks in our charter?
Yes.
Okay. So Ms. Cavaco makes a motion to include in our charter, and I'm making the assumption that if this were approved, you'd allow for renumbering at a later date of the section. So Ms. Cavaco is requesting that a section be added to chapter 3 of the charter regarding pay of the select board members and the chair of the select board, setting the amounts at 20,000 and 25,000 respectively. Is there a second to the motion?
I
I would
second.
second that, David.
Uh,
Yeah.
Motion was seconded by Alan Costello, I believe.
Someone
And
might have been in before me.
I will open it for discussion. Mr. Pizer, looks like your virtual hand is up. We'll need to unmute you, Larry.
Go. I'm not absolutely sure that I have a problem with spending the money, but making it an open grant, that does bother me. I would rather see a method of allowing a select board member to apply to the town for the expenditure of money, which leaves the town with some control over what turns out to be a fairly substantial, I think we're talking about $105,000 as the total amount. So while I'm not specifically objecting to the amount of money, the simple statement that a person receives that amount of money, that's a rather grave change to the way we have treated our selectmen from the way they've been treated over the past 400 years. Well, 350.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
I
Yep.
see Alan's hand is up next. Alan?
Oh. Yeah, I'm gonna, in light of what's going on lately in town and the size of the budget that was just recently approved for us to approve on in the Springtown meeting, I have to agree. I mean, we're talking about some real big time issues, big time projects and problems and things going on in town. I really think it's past time that we compensate the select board members for the amount of work, the type of work, the complexity of things that are now becoming, everyday occurrences here in town. So I'm sure we can banter back and forth on the dollar amount, but I think a sizable increase in the stipend has to be addressed. So I'm in favor of any type of motion that addresses that. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Tim, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm entering my second full term in FinCom. And I am just getting a taste of the amount of work that is needed within FinCom right now, and to equate that to what the select board has to do is absolutely mind-boggling. I had spoken to one of the past select board members, and that member had made a comment that 60 hours a week is just the tip of the iceberg. It's not a matter of quote unquote attracting people to this job. That job of select board member is just an incredibly demanding job, and just trying to understand the level that I'm at. Their level must be just out of this world. I don't know. I owning my own company for 41 years and and managing 150 plus people. I think $20,000 a year is just minimal. And to manage, I just want my fellow board members to understand this. To manage and facilitate a 300 million budget. Let's put our arms around what 300 million is, right? And these, the select board members have the responsibility of moving that around, etc. I think 20,000 is, and I'm using the word lightweight. If anything, I'd prefer to get up a little higher, only because let's get into the reality of things. For 300 million, managing $300 million and voting on everything they have and the amount of time that they put in, it's to me just phenomenal. You can't argue the amount of time. And Larry, I agree. Dress them up in pilgrim hats, whatever you want to do. It's 400 years ago. Times have changed, and also means of compensation have changed, and sacrificing their free time, sacrificing their social activities, their livelihoods to dedicate towards the responsibilities of a select board member is astounding. My hat's off to them. If anything, I would like to probably even just think about just making it more realistic. Just making it more realistic. The amount of time and effort and responsibilities they have. 20,000, really? And to say, oh, it's 100 G's. Okay, $100,000. I got it. Did I lose someone?
Nope.
Okay, $100,000 for the responsibility of 300 million. I think that's a drop in the bucket. I would suggest something more like $50,000 a pop, and 55 for the select board chairperson. But I don't want to mess things up. Betty has the right idea, the right direction. Last thing I want to do is mess things up. I'm just bringing a little bit of reality to the situation. But I would like the select board to I would like this board just to look at the amount of responsibility, the amount of time that they have, dedication. And I'm just getting a pinch of what it's all about being on A&F. They're light years ahead of the time that I have to spend. So please reconsider that. Thank you very much for the time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tim. I see Mr. Zubaroli's hand up next.
Yep, thanks. I just have a couple of questions. One statement and a couple of questions. People choose to run for the select board. So it's like, I'm kind of equated to getting into education. You don't get an education for the money, and you're choosing to run for the select board. You're choosing to be a part of town leadership if you win the election. So I think that's something to consider. I also just have a basic question. Betty, when do you foresee this happening? And two, how and where is the money going to come from?
Can I answer those?
Go ahead, Betty.
So when I see this happening is when the charter revisions are voted on. And where I see where the money is coming from is the same place where the money comes from everything, unless there's some earmarked fund that, we can tap into, that doesn't have raise and appropriate in it. And I understand what you're saying. Well, you decided to run for office. Let me tell you. And obviously I can see that there is no one here that served on the select board. It is 24/7. You are never not on duty. And I think it's really kind of a slap in the face. I mean, I never in a million years thought it would cost me money to serve as an elected official, and it did. And the $4,000 or $4,500, we are making major decisions that affect every single person in this town, and it is constant. We have to deal with all the unions. We are road commissioners. We are water commissioners. It's honestly walking away from the select board. I'm thinking I could be anywhere doing that job and making a well into six-figure salary. So I think it's unfair and unjust to say, well, that's what you were elected to do, because quite frankly, in the past, not while we're barreling down on 65,000 residents, in the past, maybe in the 70s, you could put in 10 or 20 hours. It's impossible to do it now. And I know that every single one of the board members that I have ever served on not only had jobs, but they had difficulty doing their full-time jobs that paid the bills with all the responsibilities that the select board has. Because it is nonstop.
So let's just say that we add this in, that in October, if this is done by October 24, town meeting approves it all, right? How, just looking at the financials, right? If we say, and Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, so if the charter, if it states in the charter that select board members shall be paid a stipend of, or shall be paid a salary, whatever the amount happens to be, that would go into effect immediately. Right, Larry?
Go ahead, Larry.
Yes,
Okay, so then that would then have to go in front of the finance committee for a funds transfer, correct? And
that's one way of doing it, yes.
so it would be a funds transfer, and at this point, it would probably come from whatever happens to be left over in excess levy.
Most
Right.
of
I mean, I'm just trying to parse it out so that so that this is a reasonable expectation for not so much future board members, but current board members as well.
Well, may I?
You understand what you see my thinking?
Yes, but like as of right now, it goes through the same exact process that it goes through right now. It's just more money. Because I believe tomorrow or tonight, on the agenda, no, maybe it's tomorrow or Thursday on the FinCom agenda is the compensation of select board members.
Last week, we did it last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it still goes through the same exact process. It's just a bigger number. So it wouldn't change the dynamic of how we went or how it would go through the processes of all the town departments or town boards. It's just a bigger number.
Okay, so it's a bigger number, understanding the time commitment that select board members put in. Would it be reasonable then to include or reinstate, because I think once upon a time, select board members had the opportunity for this, to reinstate benefits as well?
Well, I don't know if we would have to reinstate benefits, but I believe by law, over $5,000, they would have to offer benefits.
Yep.
And then that choice would be up to whoever the select board members are.
I think if we're gonna put this in, I would think we would wanna just line out I mean, I know when in doubt, leave it out, but I think we would wanna be very clear not only of what the benefit would be, but also what expectations each select board member can have. And what it means for the charter and for the residents' understanding moving forward.
Thanks, Rob. Len, I see your hand up next.
Thank you, David. I have a couple questions, and so wasn't it a couple years ago, maybe before my time here in Plymouth, that somebody had a warrant to basically do away with the select board compensation, if what I read was correct? And so my question is, putting this in the charter, do we run the risk that somebody, does the charter then have to be modified if a group of people get up and decide they don't want this?
Yes, if it's a charter provision, the town would be obligated to follow it. It would still go before the Advisory and Finance Committee, and it would still be voted on as a part of the budget package by town meeting. But if someone were to wish to change that amount or to remove that provision from the charter, it would need to go through either a charter review committee and face a vote of town meeting, or through a charter commission that has greater latitude than what we have, but would ultimately face the voters.
And so you said that it would go into effect next fall, if that's when this thing was voted on and passed. But isn't the charter not actually ratified until it goes through home rule petition? So wouldn't that element be delayed until the legislature voted on that? And we know that sometimes that could be years.
Correct. Yep.
So I think the point of it having to worry about it happening next fall is not an issue. It could take years for this to take effect. So I'm not against the pay. I'm just questioning is there another place that this needs to be? Is there something else? I don't know if a bylaw, I'm not a legal scholar, but is a bylaw or some other mechanism? The other thing is, what about the other committees? There's other people, as Mr. Lawler said, they work just as hard. So do we need to think about compensating them? I mean,
Well,
it just becomes another thing.
we're
and then
discussing the select board, though.
Oh,
We're
I
not
understand that.
talking about
I
those
understand
other-
that. I understand that, but does it open up we open up the box, does that box end up containing other things in it? The other
No, I
thing-
don't think so, because advisory and finance is largely seasonal. It's our busy time now because we're ramping up for Springtown meeting. Secondly, firstly, we're reviewing the budget. So advisory and finance is seasonal.
Well, I'm not picking on any one committee. I'm just raising the point in general that what about other committees? And then the other question is, what do other communities that have fairly large budgets, fairly complex operations, what do they offer to their select board? That would be a nice number to know and a metric to measure. The last thing is just to make sure you guys said this. So you're saying if you pay by law, is an elected official, no matter what you pay them, just because you pay them a certain amount automatically makes them employees? Because my sense is that amount is about, not hiring somebody and paying them a lot of money, but not giving them benefits. So that's just a question. I'm just raising these questions. It's not for me to answer it. But I just think that I agree that it's a lot of work. I can't imagine the amount of work. I've been involved in things where you had to work 24/7, and I know what that's like. But I'm not sure what the number is that's a good starting point. My concern about that being in the charter, that's gonna be a controversial part. And do we put the review of all the hard work we do? I think we have to find another mechanism, is what I'm saying. Does it put the review of the charter, the passage of the charter, as we work on it from now towards October, in jeopardy because of this one subject matter? I just think it's gonna be, all the other changes we made will pale in comparison to this because it involves money. I'm done.
Thanks, Len. I'm gonna go to, there are a number of folks who have their hands up. I'm gonna go to Mr. Hutchinson, then Mr. excuse me, Mr. Hutchinson, then Mr. Hanlon. Then I have Mr. Pizer and Mr. Lawler. Rob, do you still have your hand up, or are you?
Yeah, but you can come back to me. Yep.
I'll come to you after Mr. Lawler, and then we have
Yep.
a member of the public who wishes to speak. So I will come to Mr. Donato after you, Rob. So starting with Mr. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't support a motion like this. We pay professionals to manage our town, and there's an element of choice, as Mr. Zuccaroli pointed out, in running for office, and B, well, I'll leave that alone. But as far as duties go, I mean, I'm happy to offload some of the duties from the select board. So, for example, some of the commissioner duties that we're going to be talking about in this section can be offloaded if they need that. And I also think that they're volunteers. They're not trained. They are motivated, I assume, by wanting to be great citizens and improve the town in general. And so, paying them seems to me to be not necessary if they're motivated to actually want to run, and then to do the work. I'd also add that if you say that you're going to pay them $50,000 or whatever, that could fund campaigns, right? So people who want to be in power, and this is all about power, would perhaps want to be compensated in that role and be able to continue based on subsidies that the town gives them that they don't give to competitive electoral competitive persons, citizens who want to run for that office. So just I know that I'm being a little blunt here. And I guess that sort of summarizes my thoughts at first blush. But I'm not going to support this. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Mike, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I guess some of what I have to say has already been said, but I'm just going to reiterate it. The first point, I guess, is what other town in the Commonwealth does such a thing? Barnstable is another large community. Brookline, you don't want to go to some town like Avon with a population of 5,000. What do? Pick some towns that are similar to Plymouth in size or size of their budget or whatever. What do for their selectmen? I'd like to know that. Number one. Number two, the point about whether this should be a charter provision, or I mean, right now it comes up as an annual article at town meeting. It's part of the operating budget. Does something like this belong in the charter? Or should it stay as a article on the town meeting warrant? I don't know the answer. That's another question. I remember when this came up, when I was originally on the finance committee many years ago, because the original number for the selectman's stipend was much, much smaller. And then it was raised to $4,000 and $4,500. And part of the discussion at the time was the school committee manages a budget that's larger than the town budget. They have no stipend or compensation that I'm aware of. The planning board, they don't manage a budget, but they do a lot of work. They put a lot of time and effort into it. They get no compensation whatsoever. That's just a point, not a question. Furthermore, back to my days on the finance committee, I remember, and this surprised everyone when this came up, that the select board, and I believe the moderator at the time, got health care benefits, lifetime health care benefits, if they had 10 years of service. And that was voted down at town meeting. Those benefits were removed. So another question, if we give them Betty's proposal is 20,000 and 25,000 for the chair, I guess. Does that include benefits? Does that include retirement benefits? Because it becomes, if the answer is yes to those things, it becomes a much bigger issue than just a one-time annual $20,000, because it's more and it's a longer-term commitment for the town. Those are my questions, my points. I will make one other point. And that is that we postpone voting on this motion tonight, having first heard it and just having the opportunity to debate it and discuss it. I think we need to sleep on it before we take a vote on it. That's my comment. Thank you, David.
You're welcome. Ms. Cavaco, the request has been made to postpone your motion. Would you be willing to do that until such a time as some of these questions could be answered, or would you like to move forward with discussion and a vote?
I would like to move, can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. I would like to move forward with discussion. And then I think after hearing all the points, we can decide whether to withdraw the motion and table it.
Fair. Ms. Vautrain, I've seen your clapping hands a number of times. I wonder if you're attempting to raise your virtual hand to speak. So if that's the case, I'll give you the floor now.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and no turkeys.
Oh, thank you. I have two concerns. I don't know which to address first. One is related to this motion and the other is related to the minutes.
The minutes have been approved at this point, so we cannot discuss further, though at a future time we can amend those minutes. So I'd like to stick to discussion on the topic at hand for now.
Okay, I agree with people that have said, expressed concerns about other towns and what is the process in other towns currently that are towns comparable to us. I am concerned about whether this type of request should be addressed in the charter or continue to be addressed at annual meeting. I am also aware of what was mentioned about the school committee budget number being very high and school committee persons, I don't know if they receive anything. And also the issue of including an increase in pay in our charter. And then whether that would be something that would have a negative effect in terms of town meeting members willing to pass it. So those are my concerns about this particular motion.
Thanks, Martha. Larry, I think I had you next on my list.
Thank you. I heard two different responses to why this money is necessary, and I wonder if Betty could clarify. Are we talking about recompensing people for out-of-pocket expense, or are we talking about paying someone for their time? Thank
Go
you.
Go ahead, Betty.
Okay, I think we're talking about both, honestly, and I just an easy Google search. The council member in Bourne is $30,360 to 39,000. No, I'm sorry, not in Bourne. The council member salary range is 30,360 to 39,189 in Barnstable, Massachusetts.
That's a counselor.
So like I said, it's both. It's time and it's expenses. I mean, quite frankly, $4,000 doesn't even pay for gas to go to one meeting a year, a week. And there are several meetings, and it is much more than a regular full-time job. Mr. Lawler said, 60 hours. 60 hours is a picnic compared to the amount of time that people put in, and especially as chairman. And it's not the size of the budget, it's the complexity of the things that we do. And the school committee doesn't do that. Yes, they have a larger budget, but we have, close to 65,000 residents. And I, for one, can say I probably spoke with every one of them. It's a much bigger reach as a selectman than any other board. And I'm not saying that other boards don't work hard. I'm just saying it doesn't compare, because I was also on FinCom. So that's just what I'm saying. And, frankly, having it in the charter, I think kind of stops the, and I'm just going to say it, and I hope people don't take offense, the foolishness of bringing warrants or motions forward to reduce the select board down to zero pay. I personally could have cared less, but it's offensive to some people that nobody realizes how hard they work. And that's really a slap in the face to them, because they do work hard. And like I said, am I saying they work harder than other boards? They do, because it's a 24/7 job. You can't go anywhere. You can't go do anything. I didn't take a vacation for 6 years. So I mean, there has to be some kind of compensation. We keep talking about a professional government. We don't have a professional government, because we don't do anything professional. You're paying $4,000 for a select board member, and you expect them to put in 40, 50, 60 hours. When we're in contract negotiations, they're nonstop. They're going into 2, 3 o'clock in the morning from 7 a.m. People get compensated for that. And I do believe it should be in the charter, because then we don't have to worry about the nonsense, and not me personally, because it's doubtful you'll see me in that position again. But you don't have to worry about the nonsense of someone, having a personality issue with someone when actually their course of action is at the ballot, but instead they want to take the entire organization down to their knees. And it's disrespectful, because whether you like a person that serves on the board or not, it's a full-time job plus. and they deserve not only the compensation, but the respect of the position.
Thanks, Betty. Larry, did you have a follow-up question?
Nope, that was the question.
All right, thank you. I still have committee members who have their hands up. Mr. Donato, I promise I will get to you. Mr. Zuccaroli, then Mr. Lawler, then Mr. Hutchinson again, then Mr. Levin. I'll ask that folks refrain from reiterating points that were already made and instead focus on new commentary on the subject.
This is actually a follow-up to something that Betty said. So council members in Barnstable are paid 30 to 39. There are communities much smaller than ours. For example, and you know, you can look throughout the 6 New England states for this. Bethel, Connecticut, which is a community that which is where I have an apartment during the week. That community has a 3-person select board, and the first selectman of that community, which who again is elected, to answer your question, that individual receives a salary of $80,000 a year. So there are communities that do compensate their select board members. That is a in that community, that is a full-time job. Counselors is certainly, there's more responsibility in terms of time. I think the number of 20 to 25, you're not going to find necessarily a full-time job that compensates someone in that range. I think this is a conversation worth having. I'm inclined to support it. I'm not sure of the timing at this point. But just, you know, to respond to the question of, do other communities compensate their elected officials that are in more of a full-time leadership role? The answer to that question is yes. And as you can see, the range 30,000 to 80,000. So there's quite a range to be had there.
Thanks, Rob. Barnstable is a city form of government, electing town councilors rather than select board members. So I do want to point that out as this conversation moves forward. So there is a difference between those 2 positions and truly in the form of government. The point is, I think the outstanding question is, what are other towns in Massachusetts compensating their select board members with? That seems to be the prevailing question here tonight. So I do think that if we end up postponing, and I'll bring that back to you, Betty, when I finish calling on folks. If we do end up postponing, I think some research into what other towns are compensating their select board members might help members here feel as though they've made an informed decision. I'll come to Mr. Lawler, then Mr. Hutchinson, then Mr. Levin, then back to you, Betty. Mr. Lawler.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to correct a couple of things. I did not in any way insinuate that A&F works harder than the select board. What I was trying to tell people is that basically in A&F, it is a tremendous amount of work, and I can just imagine what the select board has to do above and beyond what my workload is. So I just want to correct that. Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether or not we're using the right word or not, because certainly compensate is not the word. If you want to use the word compensate, it comes down to paying a select board member around $6.50 an hour. Thank you, McDonald's. So I don't know if you want to use the word compensate. There must be something in there that we can fool around with that has a more addressing word to it. I don't know, but that's something I think we have to work on. I also think that we might need to sleep on this and go out there and gather information as to what other towns are doing for how they pay their select board members. But certainly to think of a select board member as a quote unquote volunteer and great citizens. And what planet are you on, Joe? I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawler. Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I work more than 50 hours a week, and I'd like to get compensated for my time if that's what we're talking about. And I also would like a vote this evening. And if you postpone it and to do research, I'd like that research to show a demographic profiles of the towns that you're comparing. A three-person select board would tell me that that's a pretty small town, might not have a full-time town manager, for example, who should be supplying information and guidance to the select board and helping them be the leaders that they're supposed to be. And so, I would just put that out there as a request for those who are doing research. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Joe. Mr. Levin.
I just did a quick look on Brookline. Brookline had a vote in 2020, basically doing about the same thing, and it got turned down. There's a caveat to that. They were also asking to compensate the school committee. I agree we should have more information. I would not vote to have this passed today. I am also concerned about putting it in the charter. I understand Betty's comment about politically and maybe personally motivated warrant article to strip select board people of their, I don't know, you're right. What's the right word? It's like Handbook versus Guide. Is compensation right now? I don't know. We'll figure that out. But I think that if you put it into the charter, then, and if the town votes that we want to take it out, then we got to go through this whole, using a good Yiddish word, bashugana thing here, this craziness to do that. And it just will be a never-ending process. Because I believe that even though it passes by the town members, the town meeting in October, I don't believe any of the provision of it go into effect until the legislature votes on it. So it could be years before that increase, or whatever you want to call it, takes you. I agree that these people need to be compensated. People, like I said, people don't realize, all they realize is when something doesn't get done. That's the only thing they realize. Ask anybody if they want to do that job, and you'd hear more no's than you'd hear yes. So the people who are willing to stand up and take on that responsibility, just like us here with this committee or any other committee, it's a commitment. So I would vote that we basically table this until we can have another discussion about it with some data. And I agree with Joe that the data needs not just to be numbers, it needs to be somewhat of the relative size of the community. And I think it's a good discussion. It's an important discussion because I think it's an important part of our town. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Len. Ms. Cavaco, the request has been made a second time to table this motion until a future date. I do see that both you and Mrs. Zuccaroli have your hands raised in addition to Mr. DiNardo. Do you care to withdraw your motion until a later time?
I'd like to hear from Mr. DiNardo.
So we are in discussion on a motion, so I'm not going to allow the public to speak until after we've either voted or tabled the motion. I do promise to call on Mr. Donato as soon as our discussion is over. But until such a time as either a vote has taken place or we've moved on to a withdrawal, I'm gonna hold it to just the committee members.
All right, well then I will withdraw my motion and go back and look for information, but I'm wondering, David, if we should create a little subcommittee to look into all the information that the board members and probably other folks are questioning.
I think that's quite fair. So I will ask that if folks are interested in joining Ms. Cavaco and looking into this, I will ask that no more than 3 additional members join her. You can do so by reaching out to her and me via email to express your interest in joining this research team. I'm going to come to Mr. Donato because the motion has been tabled and he's been very patient while we've been discussing for the last 50 minutes. And then I'll come back to you, Mr. Zuccaroli. So Mr. Donato, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for acknowledging me. I'm not a member of the committee, and I know it's very gracious of you. I've been a town meeting member in this town for 3 years and 33 years in the town of Saugus, so I'm very familiar with municipal government. But I think I'm sympathetic with the select board. I mean, any good town meeting member, I mean, I think I've spent tens of thousands of dollars, so I'm sympathetic to this plea. But we also have to understand, just like the presidency, although people don't feel the president's not getting paid enough, we always have people that want to run for president. And I would argue that, boy, we always have candidates for the select board, and we've had good candidates for select board. So we don't have a problem with that. We're going to run into a problem with anything over $5,000 is going to trigger pension and medical. You're now going to have a select board that's a little too close to the executive branch for me. There's not that separation because now they're getting paid. We did hire a town manager here. He's getting paid very well. He has a 5-year contract. He's a professional. He has all the credentials. I think that package is $300,000 a year. I had said from the beginning with this committee, we just had a political battle, and there are folks in the town that are trying to move the town towards a city, and that I thought it was important that we quell that somehow. In my opinion, after seeing this form of government, the select board has too many roles. If anything, I think we need to shift. For instance, collective bargaining should be the town manager. He's the professional. He's separate from the political winds of the town and should be negotiating those things. And it should be approved by the select board. That happens in a lot of towns. Tonight, there'll be warrant articles that the select board is going to listen to. That's just administrative. In most towns, they accept the warrant article, thank you, and they insert it in the warrant. That should be taken off their docket because they cannot stop a warrant article. If I get 100 signatures, they have to call a special within 2 weeks. So what I'm seeing in Plymouth is when this was little sleepy Plymouth, the select board did everything. And then one time we had to layer a town manager on top of that. That happens in a lot of towns in Western Massachusetts. The select board runs the town. When Mr. Zuccaroli talked about Connecticut, do they have a town manager there? I suspect maybe the select board are the entire executive branch. So not only do we have the volunteer select board, we have a paid executive branch, and we need to shift more authority with oversight over the manager's office over these issues. That's just my opinion. But I am open to listening to a potential increase in the stipend, but we're going to hit that $5,000 ceiling. In closing, I want to say this. The town of Brookline has a $100 million larger budget than we have. And like the gentleman said, they're paid a stipend to that. If you cross the line into Brookline, I don't think you would think you were either in Boston or Brookline. You wouldn't think you were in a town. But guess what? They have a town form of government and they have town meeting. So I think some people are trying to get a city form of government when it's just not allowed. So a lot of these councilors, that's a city form of government. they are the executive branch. So I just want to thank you for your time. I know this is gracious. I'm not a member, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Mr. Zuccarelli?
Thank you. First of all, the select board is the executive branch. Let's just get that clear right away. Second of all, I mentioned Bethel, Connecticut as an 18,000 resident community that pays their first selectman $80,000 as a point of reference to Mr. Levin's comment. Thirdly, I don't think anyone is moving towards a city form of government at this point in time. And my point, the point that I actually wanted to make was that before Betty withdrew her motion, I wanted to make an amendment to her motion to more or less to actually to table the discussion pending research and come back to this committee at a later date. So David, to your point, and Betty, to your point, you know, wanting someone to work with you to find like communities in terms of what they do with their executive branch, I'm right there with you. I think that the community needs to be very careful about some of the accusations that they make and some of the assertions that they're making regarding the compensation and regarding how this town is governed, particularly if they're coming from another town.
Oh, thank you for your comments, Mr. Zuccarelli. Betty, I see your hand is up.
I think just I was gonna respond to Mr. DiNardo saying the selectmen are the executive branch, which is what Mr. Zuccarelli said. And honestly, the selectmen are the ones that set the budget. So it's imperative and actually has been quite successful since selectmen started negotiating contracts. So, and as I can mention, as of the latest PEC agreement, which happened right before May, and we saved the taxpayers over $3 million, and that would have not happened without the select board. So
Thanks, Betty. I think this was a great discussion. I think this will be revisited at some point in time. Betty, you are hereby asked to head up that working group. Mr. Levin has expressed his interest via email. Mr. Zuccarelli has voiced his interest in joining as well. So there is room for one more other person. Please let me know offline if you are interested in joining along. I did skip public comment here tonight. My apologies to the public. So I will open it up now if there are any other public comments in addition to Mr. DiNardo's previous comment. Hearing and seeing none, I'll move on through our discussion items. We'll come now to a discussion of Chapter 3. You should see shared on your screen Chapter 3, the executive branch, which does include the select board, the town manager, and the planning board. We'll start with Section 1. Rob, would you mind zooming out? Oh, you are one step ahead of me. I appreciate that. Section 1, 3-1-1 reads, a select board of 5 members shall be elected for 3-year overlapping terms. The regular election of the office of selectmen shall be held in accordance with Chapter 5 of this charter. We cannot change by law the term of office or composition of the select board. And I believe Kelly McAlrath's office is bringing forward some articles at town meeting to correct language such as selectmen. I'm happy to entertain a motion to change the word of selectmen to select board, but I do believe that Kelly's addressing that through her process. I'll defer to the committee how they'd like to move forward on that item. All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll move on to 3-1-2. Vacancies of the office of selectmen shall be filled by special election in accordance with General Law, Chapter 41, Section 10, and any other applicable law. Mr. Pizer.
Well, I hope you are expecting this motion.
I was.
Yeah. I move that we eliminate section 3-1-2 because we're simply reiterating state law. State law says that we must do that. It has happened during my term multiple times as town clerk, and it wasn't the charter, it was state law that governed my activity. So it's unnecessary.
For reasons of repetitiveness of the general law, Mr. Heiser moves that we eliminate 3-1-2 from the charter. Is there a second to the motion?
I second it.
Mr. Lawler seconds the motion. Is there discussion on the matter? Hearing and seeing none, I will proceed to a roll call. Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote. Mr. Hanlon,
You couldn't read my lips? Yes.
thank you. Ms. Cavaco,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
Yes.
Mr. Pizer,
Yes.
Ms. Votrain,
Yes.
Mr. Zuccaroli. Mr. Zuccaroli,
Yes.
thank you, and I vote yes as well. The vote is unanimous. The motion carries. All right.
8 or 9, Dave.
Sorry?
8 or 9.
It was 9, yep. If you wouldn't mind scrolling down just a scotch, that would be great.
A scotch?
Yeah, it's a word. All right, thank you. 3-2-1 reads, the select board shall be the chief executive body of the town. It shall serve as the goal-setting, long-range planning, and policy-making body of the town. It shall make recommendations on major courses of action to the representative town meeting. It shall adopt policy directives and guidelines which the officers, boards, committees, commissions, and employees of the town shall implement. The select board shall maintain a policy handbook containing such policy directives and guidelines. Mrs. Zubaroli, is your hand up for this one?
It is, just in case there's any question, there it is right there in the charter, the chief executive body of the town.
Thank you, Mrs. Zubaroli. Are there any changes? Mr. Heiser, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I have only a question as to whether or not this recognizes the planning board's role in long-range planning. It seems to me that there are two planning bodies. I definitely agree that this is a major responsibility of the select board, but to say that it shall serve as the long-range planning and policy making, the long-range planning body of the town, seems to, I think when we get to the planning board, it's going to say the same thing. That confuses me.
Are you suggesting that we take out the long-range planning portion from this?
No, I am suggesting that we add in consultation with the planning board.
Okay.
No.
Go ahead, Joe.
I second that. Is that a motion?
It's not yet a motion.
Okay.
Larry, could you structure a motion that will be then seconded by Mr. Hutchinson?
May I say something?
We'll get into discussion in a moment.
I guess it's a matter of sentence structure. It shall serve as the goal setting and policy making body of the town, and in conjunction with the planning board, the long range planning body of the town.
All right, I think that was a clear sentence. would you mind repeating it so that Rob can enter it in here?
How it begins, it shall serve as the goal setting, but then go to and policy making body of the town. And then a new sentence, it shall serve in conjunction with the planning board as the long-range planning body of the town.
I second.
The motion has been made by Mr. Pizer and seconded by Mr. Hutchinson. I'll wait till Rob gets the language here before we jump into discussion. Yep, so Rob, I think in the first sentence, you would just take out the comma before the word and. And then obviously we would delete the remainder of the sentence after the second sentence. All right, I see
Grammar
Mr.
and the deletion I'm not worried about. I'm just worried about the language at this point. Larry, is this what you were saying?
Let's see, it shall serve as the goal setting and policy maker. It shall serve in conjunction with the planning board as the long-range planning board of the town. The only suggestion I have is that you capitalize the P and the B in planning board.
Right.
Yeah, I think
But
you
yes, otherwise perfect.
I think you nailed it, Rob. Mr. Levin, I see your hand.
I'm not sure planning in the original form was talking about the planning board.
Correct.
Planning board only deals with planning of building of structures and developments, whatever you would call it. I think this is a generalized use of the word planning. You know, they now have a session where they set goals for each fiscal year. They just talked about the 2025 goals. That's planning. I don't think this has anything to do with the planning board. So I'm against this. This is changing the whole context of the word planning, and I think it's being misconstrued about what it actually means. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cavaco?
I concur, Len. This is not, I mean, the planning board is, you know, land, building, everything. The select board has long-term goals. We make plans of where we want to see the town. Nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the planning board. I will not support this either.
Thanks, Betty. Mr. Hanlon?
Similar comment to Ms. Cavaco and whoever made it before Ms. Cavaco, maybe it was Mr. Levin. Planning board is involved with land use planning. That is a very specific subset of planning. The Board of Selectmen is involved with lots of other planning, capital planning, whatever. So the context that Larry's trying to insert in here, I think, is not appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. Mr. Hutchinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The planning board has two jobs. One is the master plan, and the other is the zoning bylaw, which is what you guys are referring to in your comments earlier. The master plan actually lists, well, it has a whole chapter of tasks that the select board would be responsible for executing. And what this does is joins the planning board and the select board more closely based on the task list for the next 10 years articulated in a master plan. And that's useful even today. And Mrs. Cavaco would remember perhaps that the select board's goals reflected that exactly. So when you write your goals and a select board member comes along and says, well, this is what I'm going to do for next year, that data came from the master plan, came from the work of the planning board. So this is a very important addition to the language. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. Mr. Lawler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Len, I'm going pretty much what you had said. And Betty and Mike, I am not supporting this. I think it brings a severe complications and misinterpretations and points in the all wrong directions. Can we bring this to a vote, please?
Yep, I don't see any other hands raised at this point, so I will call the roll. Mr. Hamlin, if you had a vote, how would you vote?
No,
Ms. Cavaco,
No,
Mr. Costello,
No,
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes,
Mr. Lawler,
No,
Mr. Levin,
No,
Mr. Pizer,
yes,
Ms. Votrain,
Yes,
Mr. Zuparoli,
No,
and I vote no as well. The motion fails by vote of 6-3. All right, are there any additional comments on 3-2-1?
can I just say something, David?
Yeah, please do.
I understand what Joe was talking about, and I think that if there's something we need to do to more clearly define the connection of the select board to the planning board, then we should do that in the section about the planning board. Thank you.
Mr. Hanlon,
yeah, a question about the last sentence. The select board shall maintain a policy handbook. Do they currently maintain such a policy handbook?
Ms. Cavaco, I want you to answer that question.
Huh.
You're muted, Betty.
I don't think it's an actual book, Mike, but we have a document and guiding principles. So, I can get that and share it with the board.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Hutchinson, I see your hand is now raised as well.
thank you. Actually, there is no handbook per se, and there is, as Ms. Cavaco points out, a list of policies. But having a handbook with the policies would be appropriate. And so maybe what would be required would be more detail about how such a document would get published, updated, maintained, all of that. I'm not sure whether people will want to do that, but right now there's no handbook, and if we're going to carry on and not have a handbook, then we ought to say that.
I think we're splitting hairs if we're going to start talking about whether it should be a document or a handbook. I'm certain that if you
Okay.
went to the town manager's office and asked for the policies of the select board, you'd
Right.
be able to obtain those. If you can't, then I think we ought to bring that back up. So maybe Joe, you'll do a little investigative work for us, see what the town manager turns over. How's that sound?
Sure. I'll give Derek a call.
Wonderful. Ms. Votrain, I see the clapping motion again. I'm gonna assume for the remainder of this meeting that means you want to be recognized. Please go ahead.
oh. I didn't hit the right, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Obviously, I'm hitting the wrong icon. I think that we should, if we keep this last sentence in, that we should consider adding to be implemented by the town manager, assuming that is who is responsible for implementing those policies.
Ms. Cavaco.
The town manager reports to the Board of Selectmen. So it's not the other way around, although at some point it was. But I think the select board shall maintain a policy and scratch handbook, because there's no printed book, containing policy directives and guidelines, period.
Go ahead, Martha.
Okay. So Betty, who's responsible for implementing those policies?
Go ahead,
All of
Betty.
us. I mean,
Who's
the select
responsible
board,
for
the town
implementing?
manager, everything, everybody.
So as an example, the select board recently implemented a policy regarding the timeline at which you can submit articles for the warrant. They tightened up the timeline, and the town manager's office is required to follow those guidelines. But it just so happens that Brad Brothers coordinates the compilation of the warrant articles. So although it's the select board's policy, it's the town manager who carries those out. So the select board delegates
Of the
that
policy makers.
particular policy to the town manager's office. I happen to think that this section is fine as it is.
I agree.
Mr.
But there
Hanlon,
is an actual physical handbook, is I think the whole point.
Mr. Hanlon, go ahead.
I couldn't hear what Betty was saying. There is or a handbook or there is not a handbook.
There is not. There isn't an actual, when
Okay,
someone says a handbook to me, I'm thinking it's a little black book with a bunch of words in it. There is not a handbook. There isn't a printed little book, little black book, little blue book, little red book, whatever you want to call it. There is not something like that I'm aware of, but there are all sorts of policies and our guiding principles.
okay.
Unless one of you guys knows anything differently. I've seen the stuff in, online or in writing or something like that, but never an actual book.
Do you have a follow-up, Mike?
I do.
Go ahead.
If you look at the next sentence after that, in 3-2-2, the select board shall have the power to enact rules and regulations to implement its policies. And I would argue this is whether it's an actual printed document or electronic document, whatever it is, change happens on the Board of Selectmen. The selectmen come and go.
Mm-hmm.
And how is any select person who's walking in the door as a brand new selectman supposed to understand what the policies and procedures, the rules and regulations that the select board have adopted? How are they supposed to understand what they are unless they can go somewhere, on the town website, if you want to make it electronic, or in a printed document in the form of a handbook?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
These things need to be documented in black and white, either in paper or electronically. That's what this is saying.
So on the select board's webpage, there is a town policies section that has a multitude of links regarding the display of flags on town flagpoles, fuel efficient vehicle purchasing policy, meetings and agendas, and so on. So I think we're getting into the weeds of whether this needs to be an actual physical book or do the policies exist in a form where someone can obtain them and understand them? I think the answer is yes, and that is on the town's website.
Okay, that is the question that I asked. Is there such, I don't care if it's a paper handbook or an electronic handbook. David, you just answered the question. It's on the town website. Good enough.
I mean,
and actually, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. Michelle Turner actually answered the question for us. She sent me a text.
Okay.
Mr. Zuccarelli, I see your hand up.
Yes, I wordsmith all day long. We're talking about synonyms here. We're splitting hairs. Can we please move on?
I agree. Unless there's a motion, I'd like to move on. Hearing and seeing none, we'll go on to 3-2-2. The select board shall have the power to enact rules and regulations to implement its policies. Mr. Zuccarelli, is your hand still up from your previous comment?
No, just ignore it.
All right, will do. Hearing and seeing no amendments to 3-2-2, I'll move on to 3-2-3. The select board shall review the annual proposed operating and capital budgets submitted by the town manager and make recommendations with respect thereto as it deems advisable. The town manager shall present the budget incorporating recommendations of the select board to the advisory and finance committee. Am I still ignoring your hand, Mrs. Zubarelli?
Yep.
Excellent. Mr. Pizer.
My only question is that what happens? It seems to me that the finance committee gets its hands on the budget before the select board. The town manager presents the budget. Maybe Mr. Zubarelli and Mr. Lawler can clarify that, the timing of the process.
So I think it just kind of depends on how the articles and how the budget's presented. I know that, speaking just in terms of what's happened over the past couple of weeks, typically the joint meeting between select board, advisory and finance, and school committee, typically at that meeting, the operating budget is handed over symbolically and actually handed over to the advisory and finance committee for us to begin our deliberations on. It is in here. It is in the charter as to when we're supposed to receive the operating budget to begin our deliberations. I don't exactly remember where that is. But it's the school committee presents, they develop their budget, the town develops its budget. They come together, we all come together at a joint meeting, and it is then presented to us. It's a little later this year, and then we begin our deliberations.
I agree.
Do you have a follow-up, Mr. Pizer?
I do not. Thank you.
Betty, I saw your hand up, but I think Rob may have answered the question in the similar manner that you would have. So I think that we're good with 3-2-3. Excellent. Hearing and seeing no amendments needed for that, I will move on to 3-2-4. The select board shall act as the licensing authority of the town and shall have the power and responsibility to issue license, to make all necessary rules and regulations regarding the issuance of licenses, to attach conditions and impose restrictions in the public interest, and to enforce or cause to be enforced laws, rules, and regulations relating to all businesses for which it issues licenses. Mr. Pizer, is your hand still up, or? Okay, Mr. Hanlon, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm curious if anybody is of a similar opinion. I don't remember if this was discussed by the Charter Commission. I remember hearing some commentary sometime in the not too distant past about the Board of Selectmen spends an awful lot of time issuing licenses. And would it be appropriate to create a licensing authority to take over that responsibility so that the selectmen could get back to goal setting, long range planning, and policy making?
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. Ms. Cavaco, I'll ask that you, as the only person who has served on the select board, respond.
Well, licensing is certainly part of what the select board does, and there are certain specific steps that a licensing process goes through, and it goes through town staff. And when there is some kind of, and you got to remember that it's the select board that goes to the ABCC, the state, and they are also the ones that, have I mean, they work with all the other, like the Board of Health and all that, so the system that we have as licensing, the licensing authority now works very well. We really haven't had any issues. What you see on an agenda are the licenses that have been approved that the select board and the town staff have already went through everything. And that's sometimes you see like a big bulk of licenses that have been approved, but I don't believe that it would behoove us to have just a licensing authority unless it was something that were appointed by the selectmen to be able to work in conjunction with the selectmen, because it's kind of hard to explain, but it doesn't take away from what we do, because we have certain steps that the select board goes through with our licensing people. I mean, we have Lisa Johnson, we had Tiffany Park, we had, all those people that did a phenomenal job, and Chris Badeau as well. So I mean, I wouldn't support removing it if there were a motion to remove it.
So if I understand your point correctly, Betty, and this is the sense that I have, having watched the select board meetings, is that the select board is simply the final step in the approval process, with the license itself having been vetted by the appropriate departments throughout the town staff.
Correct.
And typically it seems that they take the licenses as a single vote. So it doesn't seem to take up a lot of the time of the select board. Is that an accurate statement as well?
Yes.
Certainly there are times where they divide certain licenses because of conflicts and things like that, but it seems that it's a very small part of their agenda. Although it's a large list on their agenda, it's a small timing wise.
Right.
I see Mr. Piser's hand up and Mr. Hutchinson, so I'll go to Mr. Piser, then Mr. Hutchinson.
Mr. Hanlon is correct that the Charter Commission did take up this matter, and the person who initiated this matter was Mr. Piser. And the reason that I did was efficiency. And I have also watched and waited at various select board meetings when the select board has listened to people who have every right to appear before the town to plead their case. And my position at that point was the select board is too valuable to be that mid-level authority in the process, and that a planning board would be a more efficient matter. Having said that, and having promoted that, I was approached by past and present members of the select board who, for reasons I still don't completely understand, were quite passionate about wanting to maintain their control over the licensing process. So I still defend my position, but I'm not ready to go forward with it in this board. The select board says that that's a very important role, and believe that that's an efficient use of their time. I will defer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Isaac. Mr. Hutchinson?
Thank you, Dave. I agree with Mike and sympathize with Larry's explanation, and would ask Larry further. When I looked at this a while back, I had maybe the impression that there might be some legal constraints with respect to all the connections that Mrs. Cavaco mentioned. I think she might be right about, how the interlocking of the various steps work, and that there may be some legal constraint to keeping the select board in charge of this. But Mike's point about, and somewhat to Larry, is about offloading them of that would give them more time to pursue selectmen's goals. I agree with that. That would be a good thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Larry, do you want to respond? All right, he's shaking his head no. Is there a motion on this issue? Hearing and seeing none, I'm going to move on to 3-2-5. The select board shall have the power to approve all collective bargaining agreements to which the town is contracting agency and may designate one select person to participate in the negotiation of collective bargaining agreements. Mr. Pizer.
This is a question for Ms. Cavaco.
It's the Betty show tonight.
Is it
I guess.
is it really a good idea to restrict the select board participation to one person? I understand that it's a good idea for the select board to have an ability to get into collective bargaining because they're the final authority. I just wonder whether that part, and I defer to you, whether it should be eliminated as to the only one person.
Actually, that is a great point, Larry, because many of the negotiations take the chair and vice chair. And it's never good to go into any kind of bargaining alone. So I agree that one or more select persons to participate probably would be a good change.
Do you have a follow-up, Larry?
Yes, in that case, having heard from Betty, I would move that we say, instead of saying, okay, adding may designate one select person, to change that to one or more select persons.
I second that.
The motion has been made by Mr. Pizer and seconded by Mr. Lawler to add on line 438 after the word one or more. And I will enter discussion as well.
To clarify the motion and change select person to select person S, persons, plural.
Okay, so one or more select persons.
Thank
I'll
you.
open up the discussion. Mr. Costello?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have discussion on this particular motion. I raised my hand too early.
No problem. Mr. Levin?
It says may. Doesn't, that means it's not limited to. They may designate one person. Whoever goes to the negotiation is up to them, but it could be they could designate one person to do that. So I think trying to decide how many, and Mike, again, that's micromanaging what's going on. They may have multiple negotiations going on and they can't be together. The town manager's there, there's legal counsel there. So I think we're in that may shall. I think the word may covers it. So I don't think we need to change it. So I will not vote in favor of this.
Actually, a select
Betty.
board member is at every negotiation. It
Mr.
has
Hanlon?
been for the past 6 years.
Thanks, Betty. Mr. Hanlon?
I come from a different school. I didn't support the change to the charter to add the selectmen as part of the negotiating team because I don't think it's their role. It's the job of the town manager to negotiate collective bargaining agreements and bring them to the selectmen for their approval. Obviously, the town manager can discuss collective bargaining agreements with the select board in executive session, but I don't believe it's the role of a select person to sit as part of the negotiating team. I never have, I never will. So I wouldn't support this.
Thanks, Mike. Martha, I see your hand up.
Just a small comment, as I would say, one or more select board members.
Mr. Pizer, would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Yes,
Thank you. And Mr. Lawler, would you maintain your second if select persons was changed to select board members?
I do.
Excellent, thank you. Seeing no additional hand grade, I'm gonna see Rob making those edits. Rob, for clarity's sake, I would also delete the parentheses and the number one.
Here, it should be commercial revenue. We're losing all the, you know what we need to do, and it's something we're working on, is we need to find some more areas that we can zone like
Alan, could you mute yourself?
for commercial development and not commercial.
We're getting some feedback there. Thank you. All right, so the new 3-2-5 would read, the select board shall have the power to approve all collective bargaining agreements to which the town is the contracting agency and may designate one or more select board members to participate in the negotiation of collective bargaining agreements. Seeing no additional comments, I will proceed to the vote. Mr. Hanlon, how would you vote if you had a vote?
No.
Ms. Cavaco,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson. You're muted, Joe.
Yes, sorry.
No worries. Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
No.
Mr. Pizer,
yes,
Ms. Votrain,
Yes,
Mrs. Zubrelli. I think you said
Yes.
yes, Rob. Thank you. And I vote yes as well. The motion carries with 8 in favor and 1 against. All right. Give me just 1 second here. Um, 3-2-6 reads, the select board shall be responsible through the town manager for the efficient and orderly
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, go ahead, Alan.
I apologize. This is just a quick question. I had my hand up for actually line 437. It might just be a matter of semantics. Does town meeting actually approve the collective bargaining agreements, or do we just approve the funding for the agreement?
Of funding.
Funding.
Okay, so that word approve is appropriate. Okay, thank you.
You got it.
I didn't know if it would be recommended, but okay.
Thanks, Alan. 3-2-6 reads, the select board shall be responsible through the town manager for the efficient and orderly operation of all agencies of the town, except those under the direction of another elected town agency. Hearing and seeing no comments, I'll move to 3-2-7. The select board may investigate or authorize the town manager or another officer or agency to investigate the conduct of any town department, office, or agency. A detailed written report of any such investigation shall be filed in the town manager's office, and a report summarizing such investigation shall be printed in the next published annual town report. Mr. Levin.
So at our joint meeting with the select board, this was something that the town manager brought up, the last sentence, and he mentioned that it could be some, personnel issues, violations of privacy and all that. So I propose that from the word office after town manager's office, the comma becomes a period and the rest of the sentence is stricken.
So your motion would be in the second sentence to end the sentence after town manager's office and strike the words, and a report summarizing such investigation shall be printed in the next published annual town report.
That's correct.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second for discussion.
Ms. Cavaco has seconded the motion. I'll open it to discussion. Ms. Votrain, I see your hand up.
So an alternative would be to add in the beginning of the section that Lenny was considering to be stricken, and to the extent permissible by law, and a report to the extent permissible by law, summarizing such investigation, etc.
Mr. Levin, would that satisfy you if a friendly amendment were to be made, or would you like to proceed with your suggestion?
So let me just repeat back what she said. So after the word and the town manager's office, let me see, the investigation shall be filed in town and a report. I don't know what the right verbiage here. I was trying to track what she said. And permissible by law?
Could you restate it, Martha?
Comma, and to the extent permissible by law, a report summarizing, etc.
Would that satisfy you, Mr. Levin, or would you prefer to move forward with your motion as is?
Well, I mean, my concern with that is, again, well, I guess legal counsel would tell them what they can and can't release. Obviously, either way, if somebody really wanted to see that report, they could go to court, they could file an action against the town and try to get it released. It seems, I mean, it seems more clarifying. It basically, it does it, because right now it's a black and white statement. This way it gives a little bit of gray area, the way I would describe it.
So it sounds like you are amenable to.
Yes, I am.
Eliminating.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to ask that you withdraw your motion then.
Okay.
And Ms. Cavaco, please withdraw your second. And
Okay.
and
Well, I didn't second.
you seconded for discussion.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Ms. Vautrin, would you make a motion to insert the words on line 446?
Do I actually have to say I withdraw it, to be clear?
You said yes, so
okay, I wasn't sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
So Ms. Vautrin, would you make a motion to insert starting on line 446, the words after the word and, to the extent permissible by law?
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Levin seconds. I will reinitiate discussion. Mr. Hanlon, I see your hand up. You're muted, Mike.
Sorry. I'll go with the language suggested by Martha. My point, I guess, that I was going to make before Martha made her proposal was that the investigation is the conduct of any town department, office, or agency. It does not say employee or individual, which I think could get into a dangerous territory if you made that public. But any investigation that's conducted and a report is filed should be public information. And I understand you can always go make a request to the town manager's office to make it public, but it becomes available to everybody if it's in the annual town report. So I'll support the proposal.
Thanks, Mike. Betty, I see your hand up.
Well, kind of to Mike's point, every single thing that we do in town is a public record. And if it is about an employee, and I'm sure everybody here can remember reports are filed, and if there's an employee name about it, it's redacted. So, I think, I mean, to the extent permissible by law, I mean, that's, I guess, fine. But well, I guess you could put it in there. I guess it wouldn't be a problem, but every single document, any email, anything, it's all public record. We're in a municipality. So,
Betty, Mr. Pizer.
My friend Mr. Levin talked about the happiness of gray areas. Not so sure that applies here. I'm really unclear what an investigation in let's see what it means. May investigate or authorize the town manager to investigate the conduct of any town department office. I was obviously running a division of the town for 3 decades, and every once in a while the town manager would say, what's happening with this? Is that an investigation? I don't know what that means. It's vague enough that we're more likely to cause a problem by having it there than I don't know what we're advancing by having that section in the charter.
Thank you, Mr. Pizer. I think perhaps your motion, depending on the outcome of this, would be to strike this, but let's maintain discussion on this motion. Ms. Cavaco, do you still have something to say, or is your hand still up?
just, I mean, I agree with Larry. I mean, when you turn around and say, and I'll just give a couple examples, and I'm not saying that these are actual issues, but like we have PGDC, we have, God, what's the other one? A couple agencies that work indirectly with the town, that if there were an issue, I think this language is what would govern an investigation for that issue. So, that's it.
Thanks, Betty. Mr. Hanlon?
Yeah, what kind of, it doesn't define investigation under what circumstances or what conditions would justify an investigation, but I think having the ability to investigate and make it public is an important concept. But to Larry's point, he was on the Charter Commission. Was there any discussion by the Charter Commission about this language, and what was the outcome of that discussion, if there was such a discussion?
If I may, no, I don't remember this particular section coming up.
Do you have a follow-up, Mr. Hanlon?
Well, then I guess the observation would be the Charter Commission must have been fine with it. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I want to reiterate my earlier point when we began this process. We're not relying on the Charter Commission's recommendations.
I understand. It's just
it seems to me that the discussion around this is that it is either fine as is, but it's also fine as amended. Mr. Levin, I see your hand has come up.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the proposed charter with the election last May, and in this section, the words are exactly what Martha said, with the inclusion of after and to the extent permitted by law, including the public records law. So I think that's covering, if they're investigating, I think it's a general term, they're investigating something in a department, office, or agency. It could be because it's made up of people. It's not this kind of, jellyfish thing. So, I think, again, we could go down the rat's nest of trying to figure out exactly what we're doing and trying to be too specific. I think it just basically says that's the select board has the authority to have this town manager go look into something that they feel like that was being done against the policy of the town or against an employee, or against whatever it is. So I hear Larry's comment about you could walk in and ask about what's going on. To me, that's not an investigation. That's the day-to-day operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Seeing and hearing no additional comments, I will move on to the roll call. Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote.
Yes.
Ms. Cavaco,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Mr. Levin,
Yes.
Mr. Pizer,
Yes.
Ms. Votrain,
Yes.
Mr. Zuparoli. No, I think you might have been muted, Rob. I didn't catch your vote.
No.
And I vote yes. The motion carries
810.
8-1. Yep, exactly. 8 in favor, one against. All right. We're nearing the end of our agenda tonight, so I suggest we power through. We are now on 3-2-8.
Before we leave that, I understand that we made an amendment, but I have a question still on this section, if I may.
You certainly
And this is a question that I would address to Betty. And my question is, if this section were eliminated from the charter, would that have any effect on town government? It seems to me that the very nature of the select board and the town manager is that they can investigate any town agency, and they don't need the charter to give them permission to do so. And before I make a motion, I would love to hear what Betty has to say.
If I may, before Betty responds to that, I think the effect would be that the report itself wouldn't necessarily appear in our annual town report. So although I think the select board would still be empowered to direct the town manager to do whatever it thinks the town manager needs to do in order to address any kind of issue within his structure. I think the operative point here is that the public wants this information to be disseminated by way of the annual report. So if we eliminated this, I think we would eliminate the requirement that the town manager publish it to the extent permissible by law. Betty, do you have anything to add?
Well, Rob, could you just go up a quick little click, a smudge? Is that what you called it? Okay. So, I think it's important language to keep here just because the select board doesn't even need the town manager to investigate. The select board can investigate or have the town manager investigate. So it would, I think the language kind of is important to have in there because it's very specific at what the select board can and can't do when it comes to an investigation like that. So I wouldn't suggest it be deleted.
Thanks, Larry, and thanks, Betty. 3-2-8 reads, the select board shall meet jointly with the school committee, planning board, and all other elected boards of the town for the purpose of sharing information. The select board shall schedule the joint meetings, which shall be held no less than twice a year. Mr. Levin, is your hand still up, or is it for this one as well?
I'm sorry, I didn't take it down. My apologies.
No problem. Do we have any feedback on 3-2-8? Mr. Costello.
Yeah, just quickly, the line where it says all other elected boards of the town for the purpose of sharing information. Due to time constraints, I'm not sure that happens today. Or am I wrong? Does that have to be in there?
I think the only other elected board in town, and I guess the Housing Authority and the Redevelopment Authority would be the only other boards that I can think of that are elected. Although the Redevelopment Authority has members appointed to it as well. Does the housing authority have appointed members? I think they do. Yeah, so I think that these are the only two elected boards or committees across town. Correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, Betty, anyone. Martha, I see your hand come up. Martha, you're muted.
Yeah, I think it's page 27. If you go there, it's the, what page is it? Let me see. Yeah, on page 27. Select Board, School Committee, Housing Authority, Planning Board, and Redevelopment. Those are the 5 elected boards in town.
So I guess to answer your question, Alan, there are some boards and committees that are defined in our charter that are not that are elected boards and committees, but that are not being met with or not meeting with the select board twice per year.
Especially twice a year, that'd be my question. I just didn't know if that was presently happening. All right, thank you.
Do you think that any of this language should be eliminated, or do you think that, are you in support of this, but you think it needs to be better monitored at this point?
I guess that would sum it up. Yeah, I think if it's on the books, it should happen. Maybe reduce twice a year to once a year. I don't know for some of those committees, but I don't think I have to make a big deal about it. I just was wondering if it's presently being taken up at this time, or is it just a throwaway section right now? Thank you.
Mr. Hanlon, I saw your hand come up.
Yeah, so if I heard it correctly, there are 5 boards, elected boards, 3 of which are specifically mentioned in this paragraph: Select Board, School Committee, and Planning Board, and all other elected boards, which would just be 2, the Housing Authority and the PRA, but they're not invited to this meeting. Is that what I heard correctly?
Yes.
Okay, so once again, the Select Board is not complying with the charter.
I'll ask you a similar question, Mike. Are you in support of this, and you think it needs better enforcement?
I'm in support of it, and I don't know, how do you enforce it?
I'll ask, is there anyone, and if you could raise your hand, is there anyone who plans to make a motion to amend this in any form? Okay, I don't see anyone raising their hand. So,
Oh, my hand is up. My hand is up.
Go ahead, Martha.
I would suggest that we delete and all other elected boards and possibly add FinCom and Committee of Precinct Chairs. It doesn't, to me, the thrust of the section there is related to who other boards the select board meets with, not whether they're elected or not necessarily, whether they're elected or appointed. And
could you articulate what your motion would be?
After planning board, FinCom and Committee of Precinct Chairs, and I would strike and all other elected boards.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Ms. Vautrin has made the motion, and it has been seconded by Mr. Hutchinson. I'll open it for discussion. Ms. Vautrin, is your hand still up, or would you like to speak further? All right, Mr. Levin?
Is the discussion saying that they all should meet at the same time? Because the way I read this is the select shall meet, here we go, shall meet jointly. Doesn't say how or when. It just says they need to do it twice a year. So they're saying the key two are the committee, school committee and planning board. And then the general catch-all is all other elected boards of the town for the purpose of sharing information.
Yeah, so the way that this is written, it allows for a joint meeting or joint meetings. So you could do it as a single meeting, or you could do it as multiple meetings.
Right, but it doesn't, right, so it's basically open to let them do it based on their schedule and priorities and meeting with the school board before, as they're doing budgeting. But I think it's got it's general enough that it's even, the fact that it pointed out, I'm not using the right grammar, sorry, school committee and planning board, it allows to meet with any other board or committee that they want to share information with, like we went there.
So I think the point is that this clause, as written, also requires them to meet with the Plymouth Redevelopment Authority and the Housing Authority at least twice annually, because they are defined as elected boards and committees within the town. So Ms. Vautrain's motion is to delete the words "and all other elected boards of the town" and insert instead the committee.
Yeah, I understand what she's saying. So you're saying the issue is that leaving it the way it is, it says they have to meet with every board or committee at least twice a year.
No, just elected boards, which includes the Plymouth Redevelopment Authority and the Housing
Oh,
Authority.
okay, sorry. I was reading it and I kind of got blinded.
Correct.
All right. I think it should be, I'll leave it at this. I think it should be general in a sense that it encourages them, because it says shall, not meant, it says shall. It should encourage them to pick and choose which ones you should meet with, but leave it open to meet with the other ones at the same time. So that's just I don't know how to do that.
Well, let's stick to this motion, and if you so choose to make a motion to amend afterwards, we can address that. But for now, the motion as stated is to delete the words "and all other elected boards of the town," and instead insert the Committee of Precinct Chairs and the Advisory and Finance Committee. Mr. Hutchinson, I see your hand up.
Thank you. This is just a question for context for Martha's motion. Is the COPC elected or not?
They are not.
It's not elected, but this would remove the words "all other elected boards," so it changes the nature of this clause.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I was just having the same kind of backs and forths that Len was talking about. So I'm not sure what to do about this. Thank you, though.
You're welcome, Betty.
So, I would not support that motion. The select board meets with the school committee and the planning board, and they do meet twice a year. The select board can call a meeting with any other board, and committee, even if they aren't elected. So, I actually think the language in this is, I'm not sure that with, all other elected boards of the town for the purpose of sharing information. I mean, I don't think they have to meet twice a year. I think the point of it is that the select board shares information with their elected boards constantly. So I mean, scheduled joint meetings, I mean, I wouldn't support the motion to add the finance committee and the COPC. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Thanks, Betty. Mike?
Yeah, I like the language as it's written. I think it's disappointing that they choose not to invite the Housing Authority and the Redevelopment Authority to their to this twice semi-annual meeting. Both of those agencies provide value to the town, and but they certainly the Redevelopment Authority seems to be left out in the cold and a lot of things. To Martha's point about adding the finance committee and the committee of precinct chairs, I see that as a totally different meeting, because now it's a meeting of two separate branches of government. This clause in here is talking about the executive branch, school department, planning board, select board, and other elected boards meeting to share information. Having a meeting with a legislative branch of government is an entirely different thing, it seems to me. So maybe that shouldn't be included in a different paragraph.
Thanks, Mike. Larry?
Thank you. I hesitate to tell the select board how to conduct its business. It seems to me that the select board has long enough meetings without instructing them in a pre-planned method how they should act. It seems to me that the select board, for example, was interested in sharing their feelings with us on the Charter Review Committee, so they invited us. And anytime the select board wants to, they can invite virtually anybody. I'm not, I was never in favor of the motion at all when it was added, forcing the select board to invite another committee. That's up to the board. I don't see that as a role of the charter. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Alan?
Yeah, just quickly, and thinking about this as everyone's talked about it, I wonder if the compliance issue is taken care of when you count the 2 town meetings. All of those groups tend to be in the audience, and so I don't have any real problem now with this section. I think there's an opportunity, like Larry said, they can call meetings throughout the year if they want to bring in a group or a committee. But as far as satisfying the charter, I think you could call both the spring and the fall town meeting with all those groups being in compliance. So I don't think, I think it's a non-issue now. I misread it earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Martha?
I would like to retract what I said about adding the FinCom and COPC. I didn't think of it in terms of legislative and executive. And this chapter is the executive. So I would retract my motion, except that I guess what I should say is I keep my motion, but just retract the FinCom and COPC part of it.
So your motion would be amended to strike the words "and all other elected boards of the town"?
Correct.
Forgive me, I think it was Mr. Hutchinson that seconded the motion, but I can't recall.
Yes, it was.
Joe, would you maintain your second if that amendment would be made? Joe, you're muted. You're muted, Joe.
I'm happy to withdraw if that's what you're asking.
Ms. Votrain is amending her motion to simply strike the words "and all other elected boards of the town," rather than including the COPC and FinCom in this section.
Okay. If Mrs. Votrain would accept a friendly amendment to that?
I'm all ears.
Okay, I would not include COPC, and I would talk about school committee, planning board, and FinCom for the purpose of sharing information on the budget with or information on the project, on the progress of the budget. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
So this is getting very messy. So Ms. Votrain Ms. Vautrin's amended motion would be to simply strike the words "and all other elected boards" of the town and not include either COPC or FinCom in the process.
Oh, I see. I see.
So
Okay,
would you maintain your second in that case?
sure. Well, yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Zuparoli,
I see no reason to change any of the language in this section. As it's been stated, the select board can call anybody to their meeting at any point in time. The language is fine as it is. I would like to move the question.
thank you, Mr. Zuparoli. We can certainly do that. Here, we have, we'll call the roll. Mr. Hanlon, if you had a vote.
No.
Ms. Cavaco. Betty, I think you might be muted. I'm seeing Betty shake her head.
While
Betty?
she's doing that, Dave, could you read the question again? Or the motion?
So the motion is to amend section 3-2-8 by removing the word, striking the words "and all other elected boards of the town."
Okay. Got it.
Yes,
Thank you.
So you're voting yes, Ms. Cavaco?
yes,
Mr. Costello?
No,
Mr. Hutchinson?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
No,
Mr. Levin?
No,
Mr. Pizer?
Yes,
Ms. Vautrin?
yes,
Mrs. Zuparoli?
No,
And I vote no as well. The motion fails in a vote of 5-4. All right. Is there anything else on that section?
point of order.
Go ahead, Mr. Lawler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we shut this thing down?
Well, we only have we literally only have one more sentence on the agenda, so I suggest that we do that one more sentence and then we can be done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
3-3-1 reads the select board shall appoint a town manager, town council, registrars of voters, election officers, constables, and members of all multiple member boards, committees, and commissions, except as otherwise provided in this charter and or the town bylaws. Mr. Pizer.
I actually have something substantive to say about this, and I'm wondering whether Mr. Lawler's interestingly phrased motion might apply at this point, because it could take a little while. So should I move that, or do you want me to go forward with my suggestion on this section?
Why don't you make your suggestion, and we'll determine if we want to table it.
Okay.
More
This suggests that the select board is the default appointer of committees, and it isn't. The town manager appoints the assessors. The planning board appoints all sorts of other committees. So the select board is going to, it doesn't, I don't see that it needs the charter to suggest that it can appoint committees. So if I would move that we eliminate all the words after constables.
Well, before you make that motion, and it's
Thank you. Yep.
I would ask, are those other, for example, are the assessors, do they appear, does their appointment appear in either the charter or in bylaw?
State law.
State law, okay. The town manager is given authority by state law to appoint assessors?
I believe that I believe that is the case.
I'm not certain that that's correct, but
well, it is correct that he does it.
I believe that portion of it. I don't know that state law allows him to do that with as right. But I think that this will take a longer discussion. So rather than hold that discussion now, I will ask Mr. Pizer that you motion to table section 3-3 until a future meeting.
I do so move.
Excellent. And it's been seconded by Ms. Cavaco.
Motion to adjourn.
Hold on. We got
Can I add one comment, Dave?
Yep, we can have some discussion here. Go ahead.
Well, it's just a comment. I mean, it says in here all multi-member boards, and is the CPC a multi-member board? It's a kind of a board that's a special case because it's an independent board, and it is appointed now by the select board. The four at-large members are, and does that fall into this category? And does that need to be examined in order to be able to talk about this?
Well, the CPC appointment process is addressed by bylaw. So the way that this is written, it would exempt them. So that would be addressed already.
Well, okay, so I have to change the bylaw.
Yes, you would have to change the bylaw. Let's take discussion though on the motion to table. Is there further discussion on this? Rob, do you have your hand raised for discussion?
No, I just want to go home.
Excellent. I will call the roll then on tabling the remainder of our discussion items. Mr. Hanlon. Mr. Hanlon.
This is the motion to adjourn?
No, this is a motion to table the remainder of our discussion.
Yes.
Excellent. Ms. Cavaco.
Yes.
Mr. Costello.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
Yes.
Mr. Levin.
Yes.
Mr. Pizer.
Yes.
Ms. Vautrain.
Yes.
Mr. Zuccaroli.
Absolutely.
And as usual, I will vote no because I can go all night. But that being said, the motion carries. We will table the remainder of our discussion items until a future meeting. Is there any new business?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
I don't, I just don't, I prefer not to discuss it now. But for next time we meet, can we just start discussing the fact that, or the option, if moving this meeting from a Tuesday to a Thursday works? And I'd like to bring that up next time we meet.
Thursdays do not work, I believe, because of FinCom and COPC meetings. Is that correct?
That's right.
Only during only it's seasonal. I mean, right now we're doing advisory and finance has the potential and the option to do Wednesdays and Thursdays, but it's seasonal. It's budget and coming up to town meeting. After that, it's typically just Wednesdays.
Yeah, it is. And it's all actually all over the place right now for subcommittees, et cetera, blah, 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 blah. So we're
right, which is why I'm concerned that if we attempt to reschedule this meeting, we will result in the exact same position where we are now, that we will conflict with something. The reason we are conflicting with the select board is because no member of this committee sits on the select board. Everyone on this committee sits on other boards. So it's impossible for me to schedule without conflicting with something. My preference is to accommodate my members rather than accommodate the select board. That is why we had a joint meeting with them so that we could garner their feedback. What I will say is folks have expressed that they are interested in attending select board meetings. That is fine. Please feel free to do so. The meeting will continue unless we lose quorum. We have alternates expressly for the purpose of filling in for folks when they are not able to be here. So please feel free to attend other meetings as you see fit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any other new business? Is there any old business? Unless there's objection, I will call this meeting adjourned at 8:24 p.m.